Welcome to the Udrcast. I'm your host, Bill Ward, and today we have a very awesome lady, very special guest today. We've been trying to get together for probably about 4 or 5 months, and I was building the studio, so I asked her to just hang tight. And she's come to share some of her story and some of her hope and inspiration for those who may have been through hell. And Mary, I just want to thank you for coming on today and being so patient with me and being here to share today. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you. I'm grateful to be here, Bill. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. How are you doing these days?
I'm doing quite well. Things are starting to level out and get back to normal after the last couple of years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
been a tough little go the last couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm starting to find myself again.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's a beautiful feeling.
10-4. I'm just going to get you to drop your mic just a little bit and pull it a little closer to you.
Is that good?
Just push it down. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Better?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
There we go.
There I am.
Yeah, no, I've known you for probably 3 years or so now.
Yeah, about that.
And we were getting pretty tight there a couple of years ago. And, I just always appreciated your energy. And I didn't really know a lot of your story, but I knew little pieces of it. And I was always inspired by you just taking steps forward and trying to do what you needed to do to recover, basically. So, I just want to thank you for... And now that I know more of your story, fuck, man, I'm just like almost speechless.
Yeah.
It's been quite a life, eh?
Yeah, never a dull moment.
No. So for the listeners or the viewers, this episode may be triggering. We may get into some pretty heavy stuff. Mary and I talked prior to the podcast going live here, and she said she's an open book, and we had a few discussions, and I don't know where it's going to go, but, if you got kids around or whatever, maybe just keep an eye on them and keep them out of earshot of some of what we're going to talk about today. So, why don't we get to it? So, let's go back into your story. Let's go back into the beginning. Can you maybe walk us through like the early parts of your life and where you were and kind of what it was like, how many brothers and sisters and what your family life was like?
I was born here in Calgary in 81. We lived just off of the Curry Barracks. My mom... She was a stay-at-home mom and periodically worked in the daycare. My father is military and he was away a lot. When he was home, it was not very pleasant. I was really sick when I was little, and my earliest memories were of being hungry and my father coming full out and smacking me in the head and screaming at my mother to shut me up so he could watch the game. And that was just the beginning. That was just the beginning of what I had to endure growing up. I have one sister who her and I are close, and I have a brother. I don't know if he's dead or alive, and unfortunately I couldn't care less. He's a terrible excuse for a human. And so he was molested by a babysitter, and then that trickled down to molesting my sister and I. For many years. It progressed to be normal. I didn't realize that it wasn't normal not to be molested. I would watch my father beat on my mom. I witnessed my brother and sister beating on my mom. I've been beat just over little things, the way I ate, the music that I wasn't allowed to listen to if I got caught listening to music. I wasn't allowed to do very much. So I found solitude within the forest, within plants and animals. I was I was an uncontrolled child. I wasn't taught right from wrong. I wasn't taught what was healthy and what was bad. My parents were both pretty severe alcoholics, and I started drugs when I was very young. The first time I had a drink of alcohol, I was 7 years old, and I was threatened to do sexual favors or chug a beer. So I chugged a beer and had to do those favors. Anyways,
Holy shit, eh? And this was all growing up in Calgary.
I moved to Chilliwack, BC in '88, just before the Olympics. So a lot of it happened there as well.
So as you and your siblings were growing up, your dad was very controlling and violent
Yeah,
to all of you.
to all of us. Yeah.
And was your mom a place where you could find safety?
I wish I could say my mom was a place where I could find safety. However, she would turn a blind eye. She would drink excessively. She wouldn't say anything or stick up for us. She would get drunk and just robe in front of my friends, stuff like that.
So knowing some of your parents' history, well, you know some of it. I read kind of what we were talking about earlier when you sent it to me. Your dad's early life was very difficult, right?
Yes.
Can you give our listeners an idea of like where your dad came from and what type of upbringing he had? Because, you know, people don't just do this because that's what they want to do. They're a product of their environment, right? As we all are. And your dad is no different. And, you know, I know that there's been terrible things that have happened in your life. And what I've found by working with people, and I've heard many stories, is some people can find like a little bit of solace or a tiny bit of forgiveness or at least a mustard seed of forgiveness by understanding partly of where maybe their abusers came from or their parents came from or whatever. Where did your dad come from?
My dad is Scottish, so he was born into a Scottish home, which is generally pretty Catholic. However, they were quite closed off with sharing, you know, things about their family and growing up. But the gist of what I've gathered is that he was also abused as a child. He didn't show emotions or feelings. He did the best he could with what he had, you know, and when I got clean at 26 years old, there were less words and more energy of my father apologizing with the guilt and shame across his face, knowing what he had done. And, you know, and I forgave him because I believe that we're all able to change and heal and grow into better people if we access that. And that was, I find solace within that he actually was able to acknowledge that he wasn't the best person.
And then he just didn't know how to say I'm sorry, or he didn't know how to express the hurt that he had done and make some type of amend. And I found most people that have never learned these things and they get older, they will do it through their actions. Usually it's giving money away or giving things away or, spending time with the grandkids. And you mentioned in your story that he really did love his grandkids that you gave him, right? And you mentioned probably even more than he loved his own kids, right? And these are the kind of things that I've seen over the years that people, as they get older, that guilt and shame eats them up because you can't live like that as a human and think you can get away with it because there's a part of us inside that is so God-centered that when you dishonor that, you actually really pay for it, right? And I know part of your story was, you mentioned like kind of growing up, or he kind of grew up from a communist background, right? What do you think that was like for him?
Yeah. Well, given that, it was normalized for him to have hate towards anything indifferent, like anything different that culture wise, skin wise, anything that fell on a veil of difference, he hated. And I had to reciprocate that growing up because I grew up in an area that had 5 reserves around it, and it was very multicultural. So that he didn't like me because I just accepted everyone for who they were, and they were just allowed to be themselves. And in his eyes, that was incorrect. It was wrong. He had a very strict code to no emotions, no colored people. There was no give in any way, shape, or form there to be able to, just love one another and get on with life. And, there was no acceptance into any type of culture or anything.
So when you were growing up and wanted to be, loving and kind and accepting and you by nature are that, having him like watching you, what was that like? If you wanted to be nice or if you wanted to say nice things or if you wanted to talk to somebody of a different race or whatever, did you have like an internal fear or how did you feel?
I had an internal fear, but I didn't really understand what was going on. I didn't really see what was going on. That came later. So when I would make friends or, try to experience what a normal childhood would be, it was obsolete. I did not have that. And that eventually, that kind rose-colored glasses little girl eventually changed. And it changed into something horrible because not knowing right from wrong and in the environment that was abusive, and I wasn't exposed to kindness and love and friendships, and like I wasn't I don't know what that would have been like growing up as if I was exposed to what regular kids are exposed to.
And so kind of switching gears to your mom, so you don't really know much of your mom's side of the family as of even right now today, right?
As of right now today, no, I don't.
And did you have any interaction as you were growing up as a young girl with your mom's side of the family?
I met my grandparents once. Her mom was pretty abusive. When my mom tried to leave my dad at one point, we came across country, ended up in Saskatchewan, and my grandma was a very mean Ukrainian lady, and I met a couple aunts and cousins. I don't remember their names or anything. Our lives were just so separated from from what you would think that a family looked like.
And your mom suffering the abuses of your father, which were symptoms of his own upbringing, but your mom just kept going back.
Yeah, she kept going back, and I really don't understand why. Like my my dad would cheat on her. He would beat her. It was just they would try and hide it, and it would keep me up at night, listening to him beat on her, and she stayed. And I don't know if that was because she didn't think that she would be able to do it on her own. Maybe it was money, maybe it was the kids, maybe it was she was just so stuck in the control of what she believed that he created, on how he wanted her to act and behave. I honestly, I don't know.
Okay.
It wasn't some sort of an open conversation. Like my parents were very closed off and didn't communicate. The communication growing up was violence.
And so I picture typically, and speaking from my own childhood also, and what I'm going to say is, you know, I had my little brother, and, we had our issues in our lives with our parents. Like, my mom wasn't really around till I was in grade 3. I don't know where she was. My dad had given us up to my grandma when I was in grade 2. And, I developed a lot of hurt and anger and, all the things that kids develop. But at least, when we finally got back together with my mom, which was about grade 3, I had a lot of hate and anger. But me and my brother, we got along for the most part. Yeah, we fought like brothers do, but the kids, my cousins and I and the other kids, we always played and we always got along. And in many ways, I think I had a pretty awesome childhood with other children around, right? What was your childhood like with your siblings and with whatever friends? Did you guys have a camaraderie? Did you laugh? Did you have a lot of fun, or were you walking on eggshells, or what was it?
I was walking on eggshells. Yeah, my entirety of my childhood, I had two. My parents gave me two birthday parties, and my birthday was never celebrated. We had Christmas and good food and stuff like that, but I wasn't allowed to have friends over. I was allowed to go out. Like I was one of those kids, like get out of the house, don't come back, right? But it was safer to be outside of the house than it was inside the house. My brother and sister, shortly after we moved from Calgary to Chilliwack, my mother caught my brother molesting me. And she took him and she threw him into the dishwasher and beat him with a belt. So I was about 4 or 5 at the time that happened, and social services got involved. Now, after they got involved, we were all apprehended, and I was the only one that was returned home. So contact with my brother and sister was very slim to none, and when there was visits, it wasn't a normal visit. It wasn't a normal visit. My sister and I, we had a pretty close relationship, as one could be with not really knowing each other. My brother, on the other hand, that was something completely different, something extremely evil and toxic.
Wow. Fucking crazy shit. So you're growing up, Chilliwack, life's pretty tough. To you, it's normal. A couple alcoholic parents, lots of very dysfunctional behaviors. And you and your sister, were you guys tight?
We somewhat were. Like we would fight. Like it wasn't just like a regular wrestling match. Like she would crack bottles over my head and I would stab her. She would try and light me on fire. Like it wasn't like your regular siblings rivalry. It was like a fight to the finish.
Right on.
Yeah, we're close. We're close today though.
But
for sure.
there was love in the fire setting and the bottle smashing though.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, there was. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then you're growing up as a teenager and you've already drank at 7 years old. And, I know that you've struggled with addiction for a good chunk of your life. And how did that start taking off?
Oh, wow. Oh, God. Yeah, right after that, I found that alcohol soothed everything. And since my parents were alcoholics, it was extremely easy to steal a bottle. You know, I would hide bottles in the back of the toilet, in my teddy bears. I would sneak home at recess and have a couple shots and go back to school. So, gosh, I remember being 10 years old, sitting on the curb, money in hand, out front of the beer store, waiting for somebody to come in and get me some alcohol. Like, you know, I couldn't go a day without having alcohol.
Wow.
I couldn't go a day without. I can get through the day. That was like the ultimate. Oh, I can't wait for recess. I can go home and have a drink.
And you're 10 years old.
Oh yeah, it was. But I was like 8, 9, 10. Yeah,
Wow.
that was a lifestyle. Yeah, like I was sitting in a meth house at 8 years old. That's the first time I ever tried meth.
So walking through these teenage years, and we're not even in your teenage years, like going into high school and, after high school, walk us through what that was like. Did you go to high school?
I did. I was, if I made it to school, which none of it made sense. So let me just break it down. So from elementary school to high school, and due to all the abuse and trauma, none of that stuff stuck. Like I wasn't able to learn like other kids. Like it's, math, spelling, reading, even socializing. None of that was normal for me. I was a violent kid. I was I was just unruly, totally unruly, because that's all I knew. And going through school, it wasn't important to me. I'd show up. It wasn't important to me. I knew everybody. A lot of people didn't want to associate with me because I would just full on come out and smash you in the head, right? Because that's how I grew up. That's what it was like in my home, and so I was good at certain things, but without being showed how to apply myself, and that wasn't a part of my makeup growing up in school. All I knew is that, it's the party just never stopped. The party never stopped when I was in school. It was.
And how long did the party go on?
Party went on until I was 26 years old.
And then what stopped the party?
I found
or changed it?
I found recovery. So there was, I was extremely violent. I was a very violent person, and I ended up hurting somebody quite bad. And I was looking at a long time jail sentence. And the judge said, here's a card. You need to go do these things. You need to go to meetings. You need to get into recovery. I had no idea what that was. I always was drawn to a different type of life. I always knew that there was something out there, but I didn't know what that was because I never had experienced it before. So I ended up going to my first NA meeting, and I thought it was a cult. I was like, what are these people talking about? I can't believe they're saying this kind of stuff. Like, what is happening here? And right away, like, I was taken under somebody's wing, and they're like, we know a place for you. Tomorrow we're going to go out from Chilliwack to Port Coquitlam. We're going to hit a meeting. We're going to go talk to this lady, and you're going to live here. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I'm still so strung out that I didn't really have a clue what was going on. But this person took the time, even as crazy as I was, to help me to further the steps in changing my life that I had no idea what was around that corner.
Did you trust these people or this person right off the bat, or were you very skeptical? Or
I was quite skeptical. I did fight it, but at the same time, I was down for anything.
you just wanted something different, and these people seemed like they were kind of legit, even though it seemed a little crazy. But I think maybe what you felt, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I know this is what I felt when I came into recovery. I didn't really believe that this shit would work. I didn't believe that any book or any higher power was the solution that I needed to feel better and to change. But there was something about going to the rooms, and I believe today it was the energy of love and the energy of hope that was given to me through the group, through individuals, that drew me back, because there was something. And I was very judgmental back then, and I could have judged everybody in the room, but that collective energy of love is what kind of kept me coming back. And I was just talking with Gord B the other day, and he had mentioned in his journey, there was this gentleman named Andrew who would sit with him for hours after a meeting and talk to him when no one would talk to him. And that exact same human talked to me for hours and listened to my anger. And he gave me hope. And he started allowing me to build trust in other men and human beings. And so maybe that's what you felt, and you didn't know what it was. And sometimes the real feeling of love, not our version of what we think it is, it's a kind of weird feeling because we've never really experienced it, right? And you think maybe that was it?
Yeah, like I had a glimmer of that previously. An example would be after some abuse would occur, I would run to the church and I would cry at the foot of Mary and just ask for something different. And I had no idea who I was talking to. I had no idea why I was there. I just wanted to feel safe. So there was that, and I knew there was something else. And when I ended up in the psych ward shortly before all that jail stuff happened, I had the DTs so bad that I would shake. They were giving me medicine because I didn't have any alcohol. And everything was such a blur. This could have been 3 years before this jail stuff. It could have been a month. Like, it was, I cannot give you a timeline because I was just so out of it for so long. And there was this guy there, and I wanted a coffee, and he would bring me a coffee with a straw in it and say, don't hold your coffee because you're going to spill on yourself. At this point, I was like, what do you want? Do you want to have sex? Like, do you want me to do something for you? Like, what do you need from me? Like, and I don't want anything from you. I just want to help you. I want to see you be okay. And he put down the book of, I don't know what gen of AA on the table beside me. And I opened it, I had a look, I had a little read, and I put it away. And that was a little glimmer of that there was something out there for someone like me, because I was never introduced to anything healthy. I had no idea that there was this entire life that I've never lived. And these people that surrounded me at the meeting and that could relate to me and accepted me for who I was and started showing me this love that didn't want anything in return. I just fell to my knees and was in awe and so inspired that anything else that I had tried in my life was just fueled by evil and fear and anger. And now I have this opportunity to learn what true love, what healthy relationships looked like. Like these mentors that I had in my life, I still have some of them today. And I'm eternally grateful that they showed me what being a human really was.
That's so beautiful. And that's similarly to what I've experienced in my journey also. I want to touch on something you'd be at the foot of Mary crying and you don't even know why you went there, or who you were talking to, or what was happening, right? I went to Catholic school most of my life and didn't really dig it, but I spent my whole life in Catholic school right till, I finished school, which I didn't finish, but till my last years of school. And I was in my addiction, and Lucy, my daughter, she's here. She's doing the video mixing today. And I have two other daughters, Lila and Jillian. And while I was burning down our lives and I was stuck and evil had me by the throat and I couldn't stop, and everything I was doing was based in the devil, if the devil is real. I know there's negativity. I don't know if I really believe in the devil, but let's just say I did. And I hated church, never wanted to go to church most of my life. But then there's this one period of time, it was about 6 or 7 months, and I was working up north, and I had this fucking terrible dream, man. And it just disturbed me hardcore. And it was like the devil was in that dream. And I woke up and my hotel room was trashed and everything was trashed. And I was looking in the mirror and I could see the devil in me. And I cried and I cried and I couldn't go back to sleep. And something happened to me that night. Anyway, I came back to Calgary because I was working out of town. That was after I lost my business. I was working out of town for a big company. And I come back to Calgary and I say to my wife, I'm going to go to church. She looks at me like, are you fucking kidding me? You don't go to church. You despise that shit. And I did. But I'll tell you, I went to 6 or 7 churches around Calgary. I'm dragging my kids around, and my ex-wife now, my wife at the time, she's like, what's going on with you? And honestly, I didn't know what was going on. I really believe that it was something inside of me looking for hope and for the light, and it was trying so hard that it was doing anything to try to find the light, and it never found that light for many more years because I never found what I was looking for there. But I will say, when I first went to a meeting, I'm going to say 5 meetings in, I sat in the Garnet block, maybe it was 10 meetings in, and that feeling that I found my church came strongly to me, and I knew I found the thing that I've been looking for my whole life. And there was such a comfort in that, eh? And I'll never forget that day, feeling that feeling, sitting in that chair, knowing this is what you've been looking for. This is what's going to help you for the rest of your life. And it has, right? And so I just wanted to share that. But kind of going back to you have all these people helping you. This one person is going to take you to this lady. And what was this What was this lady all about?
So this lady worked at a recovery house, the Hope for Freedom Society in the Lower Mainland. And, to be honest, when we first walked in there, I thought it was a drug den. Because, you walk into this, it's a house, and you walk into this room, there's this desk and a chair, and it's like, okay, so this is the boss, this type of stuff. This is who runs the show. And it was, she decided to give me a chance and gave me a date on when to be back. And, I packed up all my stuff. I showed up at this place, and the people who were running it at the time would tell you, like, I was the person who walked in there, that they were like, she's not even gonna last a week, and I was in a bad way, mentally, physically, emotionally. I was coming from the streets. I was coming from an extremely bad life. And it took me a minute to start following the rules, because I was very unruly.
Mm-hmm.
And the seriousness of getting my kids home and staying out of jail started to become a reality.
Mm.
So watching them talk about the steps and listening and actually hearing them talk about the steps, I came to my step 4 or 5. When I went in there and started my steps, I had nowhere else to go. I had nothing else that was working for me. So I decided to give it my all and to totally trust in what these people were trying to teach me and show me. And that forever changed my life. When I got to that step 4 or 5, and living the life of crime and violence that I did 34 pages of point blank of everything that I had ever done, front to back. And the stuff that was on that paper, and the lady who I was reading it with, she freaked out and went right to the director. This girl shouldn't be in this house, and she blah, blah, blah. And the lady's like, this isn't so bad. And she downplayed it. She goes, we all deserve a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And from that moment, a paradigm shift happened within me, where Creator, God, and this internal energy of love and life from the universe changed everything about me. It changed the way I felt, the way I held myself, the way I felt about others. I became a totally different person because I allowed it. I seeked it. All I ever knew was violence, abuse, drugs, crime. That's all I ever knew.
Do you think that if, that lady who you were reading it to, and she was reading it and she freaked out and she was trying to get you kicked out, if that other person who had taken the papers and hadn't said what they said, it might be a different story?
100%. Definitely. I probably would have never went a step foot again into recovery. I would have went back to what I was doing. Everyone that I've grown up with is either dead, murdered, or died of drugs. Like I can probably count on one hand how many people are clean and sober today from the community that I grew up in. And I would have ended up dead.
So thank God for these people.
Yeah.
That have that compassion, who don't shut you down, and especially when you're brand new, right? Like, it's one thing to be hard on somebody when they've been around a little bit, but you got to be really walking a fine line when they're brand new and there's trust issues and they don't know any other way, and we want to be able to keep you there. So we have to learn how to find that that line and walk on the good side of it. And thank God that person knew what they were doing with you.
Yeah. Like it was, she gave me a chance. Like,
Oh, and
if she didn't show me that compassion, and if I didn't learn that, there wouldn't be any growth. There wouldn't have been any change to the possibilities on living a new life. It really started the road of healing for me.
that was the beginning.
That was the beginning. So when I first came into recovery when I was 26, I'm 42 now. So when I was 26, you'd walk into a room of NA or AA, and you'd walk in there with your tail between your legs because they wouldn't be afraid to shove it at you. There was none of this. And I find recovery nowadays, I'm just trying to find the words for this. So I find recovery nowadays is a lot more compassionate than what it was back then because of all the deaths, which I believe that's a good thing because you're not afraid to be able to share and your discrepancies on getting advice and stuff like that, right? Like, I don't think I'd want it any other way because it taught me in a healthy way on how to communicate instead of just throwing hands, right? So having this new tool of communication and knowing that people weren't after me or wanted something from me, that taught me how to grow and how to become part of society, because I was never a part of society before.
So as you were in recovery now, you had mentioned you've at this point had three kids.
I had two boys.
Okay.
So at this point, I had two boys.
Okay.
And I was in the recovery center for 8 months, and I met my husband there. So we got married and had another child. So by the time I was, 5 years clean and sober, I had 3 children and raised them in the church. And they had a really good life. Like, they had everything that I didn't have growing up. I was actually able to create and mold and keep these children safe. It was everything that I didn't have. And I'm so proud of that. They're my life. And, and I got pregnant with my 4th daughter.
And where were your parents at this point?
My dad was suffering from cirrhosis of the liver. I stopped talking with them because I wasn't able, I didn't have the capacity to talk with people who were still alcoholics and still using drugs.
Because you were in recovery.
Because I was in recovery. I wasn't strong enough at that point in my recovery. I was quite a pillar in my community back then, and I wanted it to stay that way. I didn't want to go back to that life for anything. So when I was 9 months pregnant with my youngest daughter, I got a phone call from the doctor and had to race out to Chilliwack because I was living in Port Coquitlam at this time. I had to race out to Chilliwack because my dad was dying. And I hadn't seen my dad in a while, probably a year. And when I moved the curtain to his hospital room, he was still on the emergency floor. He had swelled. The doctor warned me. He said he may look different. So because his liver had died and the cirrhosis was so bad and he had jaundice, he had swelled. He looked like this just massive balloon that barely fit on the bed. And his eyes were so yellow and his skin was so scaly. And I'd picked him up a book because I knew he liked to read, and I was super excited to give him this book that I will never get rid of. I still have this book on my shelf. Sometimes I'll put it under my pillow and sleep with it, right? But he couldn't speak. He didn't know I was pregnant with my fourth child. And he lit up his eyes, his mouth, his hands, and he like silhouetted my belly with his hands. And he started crying. And I was like, yes, Dad, I'm sorry I didn't tell you, but I'm pregnant and it's a girl. She's due soon. And then the doctor asked me if I could try feeding him. So I tried to feed him. There was no avail. I couldn't feed him. He couldn't eat. And the next day, we ended up going home. And the next day, we came back to the hospital. My husband did not want to take me, did not want to support me at all. You know, I find like, regardless of what your parents have done to you and how they've treated you, they're still your parents. You still love them. And my ex-husband couldn't understand that. So the following day, my dad was brought upstairs and they said, he's not doing well. We're going to give him something to help him feel comfortable. And I didn't realize that was last call for my dad, right? Like, my mom and my sister were there. They were still drinking and stuff. So like when I say still drinking, like it wasn't like, oh, let's go home and have a drink. It was, let's go to the washroom and, drink our Mickey. Make sure I have that extra Mickey in there because if I run out of this one, we're game over, right? Like it was just as common as the air that you breathe on how much we would drink and do drugs. So, because of my newfound spirituality and lifestyle, my mother left it up to me to kind of bring my father into the afterlife. And I did this silently while my father was dying, and he died. And my mother started screaming at me, and she threw a Bible at me. Why didn't you read from this? You should be better. I thought you were different. And I just looked at her and it hurt, right? It hurt because at this point in my life, I could recite so many different things from the Bible, right? And that really hurt. So we ended up going home and a couple days later, I had my daughter Lily at the hospital, and my kids were my boys, and Ezra was a little too little. She was still quite young. They're only 21 months apart, my two youngest. I have 4 children in total. So my boys were scared when I went to the hospital that I wouldn't come back out. So as soon as Lily came out, I was like, okay, when can I go home? And they're like, what's wrong with you? Why do you want to leave? And I said, well, it's been a couple days. My dad just died in the hospital. My kids need me home. And they were like, wow, okay, we totally understand. We have some tests to do, but we need you back in 12 hours to do another test to make sure your baby's healthy. So yeah, sure, no problem. So that was a very, very tough time in my life.
Yeah. Crazy. And so you're in recovery. You have 4 kids. Your dad's passed. Your mom's still around in your life. Your brother's nowhere around. You've disconnected with him, right?
I completely disconnected with my brother when I was about 14 years old.
Your sister's still around, but she's not doing well.
Right now, today, or
No,
then?
at that moment.
Oh, yeah, she's still around. She was not doing well.
But you're moving forward in a good way, and you're pillar in your community of recovery, and you keep moving along. So, what does it look like over the next, 10 years?
Yeah, so we ended up moving from my husband at the time had a very close knit family, and it was really great to interact with that because I never had that, and it was something that I just adored. And we had the opportunity to buy a house, and as in Vancouver, it's not very conducive to buy a house there because it's so expensive. So he got a transfer here to Leduc, Alberta, and we bought a house here. And it was pretty awesome, actually. I had a career. He had his career. We were raising our family. I was a very hands-on mom, at the school, any chance I got. And it was beautiful. Life was beautiful. Like we had a camp. Like I was on Hastings at 15 years old. Okay, and here I am at like 28 years old, owning my own house. I had a camper, a bike, a boat. Like it was a pretty great life. Like we've worked so hard for all of that. It was just amazing. And my husband and like I started drinking by this point after we'd moved to Alberta, and a little bit before I started drinking. It wasn't controlling my life or anything like that, and because I fell out of the recovery community when I was about 7-8 years in, I fell away from the recovery community, and
You're just being a mom, you're just being a wife, and you're just living.
yeah, like there wasn't any issues at all with any of that. And then my husband ended up relapsing on hard drugs. And I had no idea. Bill, I had no idea for like 2 years that my husband was using hard drugs. And then for another couple of years after that, I tried to get him into treatment. We tried all sorts of different things, and slowly our relationship decayed. Our home life decayed. I was working 3 jobs to try and keep ends met. And eventually I just kicked the bucket and I said, forget it, give me that. And it took a while, right? When in hindsight, I should have just left. I should have taken my kids and just left right away. And that led to a 5-year relapse. I ended up leaving my husband, packing up my kids, leaving my husband with like bouts of sobriety in between, right? Trying to raise 4 kids and trying to keep a full-time job, trying to maintain a minimalist addiction. And I didn't give myself a chance to heal from that. So I stayed in that pain of my relationship. And I stayed in that pain of the loss of my father. And just before I left him, my mom was really sick. She had a disease called scleroderma and alcoholism. So the scleroderma was eating her from the inside, and so was the alcohol. She ended up being on life support with a tube that came from her clavicle to her hip to drain the infection within her body. And due to alcoholism, she had lost a foot. She was about to lose her arm. And she ended up dying a horrible alcoholic death. And it was extremely tragic because I wasn't talking to my family at that time. And I just spent a lot of money on bills and wanted to fly back out there. And it was just before I found out my husband was using. And there wasn't any extra money for me to be able to fly back home and say goodbye. So due to that, this is wild. Due to that, And my oldest brother, because when you're the oldest in the family, that's who controls the memorial, the body. And because my brother is whatever my brother is, my mother's ashes are somewhere. I have no idea where my mother is to this day. And it's been, about 9 years since she's passed. I still have no idea where my mother is.
It's got to be tough, that. And with as much trials and tribulations of abuse and whatnot you've been through with your family and mom and dad, and I can still see how much love you have for them both. And, which is shocking in a sense, knowing what you were raised in and how you could be so resentful and hateful and resistant to anything in semblance of forgiveness. And I can still see it in your eyes that you really do love them. You loved them both, and you just knew they were sick. But we can't really say the same thing for your brother. I can see the hatred and the resentment that you still have for him. And, it's very interesting as the person sitting across from you, watching and listening and feeling your energy, and everything's energy. And it's just been a wild talk so far. I'm just like fucking blown away. I want to mention something. A few minutes ago, you were talking about your husband relapsing on hard drugs, and you had no idea, and he was hiding it so well. I don't know if you know any of my story, but I hid my cocaine and crack addiction from my family for 6-7 years. And my wife would have never thought I would do hard drugs. I always hated hard drugs. And I did it, right under my family's nose. And I carried a lot of guilt and shame all through those years. But you talked about deterioration of the family. That's exactly what had happened with us. I deteriorated our relationship. I started fights. I caused fights. I wanted her to fight me so I could use with impunity. I disconnected from my kids. And I basically disconnected from any semblance of who I thought I was in a good way back then. And I became very, very sick to the point where my family thought I had depression, which I probably did, but I was just a junkie, really. And I couldn't play with my kids. I couldn't do anything. And I was pretty much an invalid. And I had lost all motivation to live, really. But yeah, those were tough days. Tough days. But so thanks for bringing that up. And I know I got a lot of work to do still in the recommitment to my amends to my ex-wife in something. I just know I thought I was done, but I'm not done. And so you just reminded me that I have more work to do. So thank you for that.
Thanks for sharing that, Bill.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
and with my daughter here doing the mixing, and one of my other daughters, she listened to one of my podcasts there last week, and she sent me a screenshot. She's like, "Oh my God, this is so good." But she's like, "It just rips my heart apart and it makes me cry." But she's like, "But it's so good too." And like, I share my story openly, right? And my daughters are exposed to some of these things like they might not have heard. And some of these things come up to me today, and I've never remembered certain aspects of part of the pain or the scumball shit that I did, right? And then they hear it new. But my hope is my honesty and my willingness to keep trying to learn and dig and grow into who I'm supposed to be and let go of who I'm not supposed to be, wears off on them, and they're able to do the same things. And part of that was I was teaching my children to be very resentful and hateful and spit in people's faces and fucking, I was not a good influence in many ways, right? My road rage and some of the verbal and physical abuse they witnessed with me being their father while we're in a family outing where I would fucking hurt somebody or chase somebody or get in high-speed chases with my kids like it, and they thought that was normal. And then when I came into recovery after a year or two in, I would see some of the behaviors in my daughters. Lucy was known as a fucking force to be reckoned with in high school. Like, you don't fuck with Lucy. And my daughter Jillian was like, she kind of hid behind Lucy's reputation. And my daughter, if you know her, she's so sweet, but she wasn't sweet at school, and she would fucking kill you. But, you know, many years later, they're doing what I would hope would happen. They're really trying to find the good side of themselves and let go of the bad. And, you know, and nothing's really good or bad. It's just a journey, right? And all my daughters and my ex-wife, they all struggle with something, but they have a good attitude and trying to work towards something better. And I do believe, as much as they blamed me for a long, long time, and I blamed myself, and I still do, right, in some ways, but I never would have found out who the truth of me really was if I didn't go through that pain. And I believe the same thing for my family. And they got to look at some of their own pain and go through that with, you know, the hope that there's a piece of them on the other side that they can find that's good, and they can release and let something heal. And you know, maybe that's bullshit, but I really truly believe that. And
I don't think that's bullshit. Not one bit. I've experienced it myself. You know, that's us as parents. There's a whole different responsibility there. You know, and that ripple effect is extremely prevalent. And, you know, the work that we do on ourselves. I always kept an open conversation with my kids, you know, about everything. Like you have the freedom to talk about whatever you need to talk about, whatever that looks like. And so do I. So through that, my kids are extremely grateful because they were able to see where I was hurt, where I healed, and what I do now. And for them to see that strength and that growth and that change, they are so lucky. And they will even say that they're lucky to be able to know that and learn that, because that's their advantage growing up that a lot of other people don't have. And it's a blessing. And there is change there, Bill. And it's not bullshit. Because if you could come from where I came from to who I am today, there is major change there. That's not bullshit.
no. And I believe it's not bullshit. And why I would say that would be because somebody that looks at it differently would say that's fucking bullshit. But I don't believe it's bullshit. I believe it's true. Exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
You laid it out beautifully.
Yeah. There's healing there if you're willing to let go of the guilt and shame. You know, I was able to, after, okay. So we're at the point where I've left my husband and I moved cities with my kids, you know, and finally, you know, I hurt myself at work, and then COVID hit, and I became extremely dependent on drugs to work and be able to provide. And, you know, I didn't have very many close people with me, but my very good friend, I dropped a pin and I was like, come get me. And they were at their wits' end. Like, they're not an alcoholic. They're not a drug addict. They were at their wits' end. And they were like, I'm so done with you. But I phoned back to this recovery house, and I phoned my friend who we were both in treatment together, like however many years ago. And she ended up becoming the director of the place. And then, and then she is trying to retire, but she loves this community so much, my good friend Denise. And she said, Mary, I have 2 people coming in on Monday. If one person doesn't come in, that bed's yours. So that one person, I got a call, that one person didn't come in, and I was in a vehicle the very next day driving down to Vancouver to go to this treatment center. Mm-hmm. It was one thing to go to recovery the first time and not know anything and learn something completely new. And it was a different thing this time in recovery, picking myself apart, seeing where it all went wrong and where all my assets turned into defects, because that's what kept me safe. But that was a lie. That was a lie I was telling myself, and it made me become this terrible person who was dependent on drugs and alcohol. And once I was able to decipher why my assets turned into defects, because everything has an opposite. Mm-hmm. I was able to look at the opposite of those defects and go, oh yeah, I remember who that person was. Mm-hmm. That's who I would like to be again. That's who I want to be. And through that, I gained strength. And I was able to turn my life around in the 2 months that I had there. Mm. I worked extremely hard to heal from losing all that material stuff, to losing my marriage, to losing that relationship over a couple of years with my kids. And I took that, and I took those amends, and I went into grave detail on exactly and owned every single thing that I did to them and to how that made them feel. And each one of my kids I individually took when I came home from recovery, and I laid it all out on the table. And they were speechless on how in tune I was with what I did and how it made them feel. And they were ready for like this big fight and all their resentments and all the hate that came from my relapse. It completely diminished in that moment. Mm. And we were able to start rebuilding because I named it, Bill. I named all the horrible things. Mm-hmm. And we were able to start growing immediately from that moment. And I became so close with my kids. And I didn't even care if I gained their trust back. I just wanted them to see their mom was back. Their mom was whole again, and their mom was there in their corner. And they got that. And our relationship flourished immediately when I got back from treatment 2.5 years ago.
Amazing. So 2.5 years ago from today, you went back to treatment.
Yeah.
And I met you, I'm going to say, it must have been 2.5 years ago because you came to Calgary.
Yeah.
And there's one thing that when I think of you, and you have met my friend Robin.
Yes, I've met Robin. Robin helped me just even in one conversation. That woman helped me so much.
Yeah, she's amazing. And she lost her son, Taylor, who I met. And Robin was an ex-girlfriend of mine. And we were close. And we weren't together that long, maybe, 5 months. But we really hit it off and we connected. And how we connected was that I'm an addict and alcoholic. And she was someone who was in a relationship with an addict and alcoholic. And one of her kids was an addict and alcoholic. And I met her son, and she always hoped that I could inspire him to find the path that I had found, because she was inspired by my story and the path I had found. And I met her son numerous times, and just a great, great man. And then we had broken up, and but we were still friends. It ended on a good way, and I want to make a note of that. Like, first time in my life I can say we ended a relationship on a good term, and we were still friends. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. Anyway, and then she gave me a message, and she said Taylor died, and asked me if I could say prayers at a ceremony for him. And it was tough and powerful, but that woman is so fucking strong. Just such a beautiful lady. And then you, in similarity with her, you lost your daughter. And it was just, from what I hear, it was just one incident. Can you tell our listeners about like what happened there?
So when I came back from treatment, and our relationships are building on the up and up with my kids, Lily started acting out. And I wasn't sure why. And she assured me that it wasn't because of something that I did. And she said she had to tell me something. So she wasn't coming home. She was running away. She's like, Mom, I got to tell you something.
How old was she?
She's 13.
Okay.
My daughter is 13 years old. So eventually she told me this thing. And this thing just held like a rain cloud over her head. And, immediately felt relief after she told me. And I told her, like, I'll support you on the steps that you want to take care of this. You have a voice. Mm-hmm. I never had that voice, but you can have that voice. And what I went through, I wasn't going to push onto her with my emotions and stuff. So I gave her grace. And she started staying home. She started cuddling. She'd sleep with me at night. Now, mind you, like, this is probably 8 months. I was 8 months clean and sober out of recovery. Mm-hmm. And so over the next 2 months, we started working towards what we were going to do. And my daughter was going to go spend the summer because she was hanging out with some bad kids. Like, I knew she was smoking weed. The people who were staying with my kids when I went away to recovery introduced my kids to weed. They came in and stayed with me, and I was like, you guys got to watch my kids so I can go to recovery. They introduced my kids to weed when I was gone. They stopped smoking as soon as I got home. Like, I didn't have any of that stuff in the house when, like, I just refused, right? Mm-hmm. So my kids were completely different kids because of them when I came back from recovery. But that's crazy. That's a whole different avenue anyways. So my daughter, she was smoking weed. And she would communicate this to me and stuff. So I decided that she would go and, spend a month with her brother in Montreal, be around some, college kids, see some ambition, get some direction in life. And it worked. Oh man, it worked. Like, she was so hopeful. She had goals now. She, like my other kids, they do have goals. They're graduated. They're, they have plans. My 13-year-old Lily did not, which is understandable with what happened in her early years. But however, now we have this plan. So she came home on August 31st. I picked her up from the airport. I'll never forget watching her run across the airport, and her headphones hit my chin so hard. I felt it for days after when she hugged me. She was just so happy to be home. And she was like, Mom, I started hanging out with this boy online, and we went to elementary school together. And he's a really good person. And I'm like, well, didn't this and this happen between you? Like, why are you even friends with him? Is it a good idea? And the daycare lady, she introduced me to this boy, and she's like, oh, he's a great kid, this and that and the other thing. I was like, all right. So Lily was going to school. And then a dear friend of ours that I had no idea until I came into recovery 11 months prior to this. So I'm 11 months clean and sober. Charn, actually. He was the daycare lady's boyfriend. And they were my kids' mentors when I was working, when I was battling my addiction. They were my kids' mentors. Like, he was another father to my daughter. And he had an accident. Was it September 9th, I believe it was, somewhere around there, September 7th. He had an accident, a motorcycle accident, where his helmet flew off and his head hit the ground. And he was on life support at the foothills. My daughter was absolutely devastated. Like, Charn just took my daughter back to school shopping. So Lily asked for space because I was like, why don't you come do a meeting with me and see all the beautiful things people are saying about Charn? And she just refused. And I said, okay, I'll give you space. So we hung out. We had dinner this night, September 10th. We had dinner and we were playing some games at the table, and it was we decided to go to bed at about 10 o'clock or so. And Lily asked me for a sweater, and I was like, why do you need a sweater? You're going to bed. Like, just go to bed. She's like, okay, well, good night, Mom. And I was like, maybe I should look into that a little more. And I was like, no, it's okay. We went to bed, woke up the next morning. And I know she wanted to leave early to help with the birthday party, which she generally did. She would go over to the daycare ladies and help. So Jeff and I went and took the dogs for a walk. And I opened up her door. She was gone. It was like 6:30. I was like, okay, she'll get up at 5:30 and head over there. I didn't think anything of it. It's just a few houses away. We took the animals for a walk, and I got back, and there's a little boy and a woman running around my yard. Where have you been? Where did you go? I said, I took the dog for a walk, and they said, there's something wrong with Lily. I dropped everything and ran as fast as I could over there. There was 2 fire trucks and an ambulance.
This is at your house?
And this is a block away from my house. My daughter had snuck out the night before with this boy, and they picked up hard drugs and decided to try it. The last words out of my daughter's mouth were, this is the first and last time that I'm ever trying this. And it took her life. Carfentanil and fentanyl mix took my daughter's life. I watched my daughter die on September 11th. From the emergency crews working on her to the policemen who drove me to the hospital. They couldn't get SARS in because there was too much overhang from the trees. So I remember hearing my daughter's heart start once. And how hopeful they were, because they came out and told me this, that when we get your daughter's heart started is when we will start getting her to the ambulance. She'll be more stable. And I could hear her heartbeat on the machine. I heard it. And so what they had done from Beddington to Children's Hospital down around 14th, they had every street blocked off, every intersection blocked off with Calgary police officers so that the ambulance had a straight shot to the hospital. And watching emergency crews work on my daughter and the things that happened, I won't get into details because it's horrific, will never leave me. And she died. it didn't matter how much Narcan they gave her. She did too much. So this little girl had so many adults who loved her, so many friends who loved her, that in one moment she was even knowledgeable. Like, I made sure my kids knew about these things. Like, and yet there was that split choice where she made the choice to pick up that drug and try it just once. That took her life, even with all the knowledge that she had behind it. And now she's gone. Bill, she's been gone now for 2 years. And her death has touched a lot of people, a lot of kids, and a lot of other adults. Because people think, oh, she's 13 years old. How could she do that? I was doing drugs at 8 years old, you know, but people turn a blind eye to it. It could happen to anybody. Just that one choice.
So my daughter, Lucy over here, can I share that story? So Lucy had some major issues with different drugs that I know nothing about. Some of the drugs nowadays I don't know much about, right? And even nowadays, all I did was crack cocaine. And there's lots of drugs you can do as young people. And she did whatever she did when she was younger, and she saw the path of recovery, and she did it, right? And then her life got good, really good. And she started having ambition and goals, and, you know, in my opinion, it was maybe a little too soon, but she wanted to go to school. And so she went to school. She got accepted into Lethbridge College, and she moved away for her first time ever. And she seemed like she was doing good. But Lucy has a little bit of a people-pleasing defect and doesn't want people to see that maybe she's not doing good. And then it kind of came to a head that she got too overwhelmed with school and being away from home and being in Lethbridge, and it was kind of piling up on her. And she called me in December, I think it was, or maybe November, and she had kind of reached out and said, like, I'm having a tough time. And we kind of talked about a plan to, you know, finish off the year there and then maybe get her back home or whatever. Anyway, I'm pretty sure it was in January after she came home for Christmas, and she loves her family, and she went back to Lethbridge. And then I don't know what day it was. And I was sleeping, and it was late, and then I woke up to this text, and it said, Dad, you got to get me out of here. I'm going to die, or this is going to kill me. This place is going to kill me or something. And I was like, what the fuck? And then the next day I woke up and I tried calling her, and she never answered. She wouldn't answer. And then eventually she answered. And then she told me the story that what happened that night. And she had relapsed on, she wanted to get, what was it? Xanax. And so she went out looking for Xanax on the streets of Lethbridge in the middle of the night. She found guys doing fentanyl. And so she bought some. And these guys even taught her to make sure you do it with somebody, and sold it to her and showed her how to do it. They said, don't do it alone. Then she went home and she did it alone. And like you just said, like that could have been it, right? And she had never done that before. And so like, by the grace of God and whatever, I'm just so happy that she didn't die. And I couldn't imagine what it would be like to lose a child. And my heart goes out to you, Mary. And like, holy fuck, right? Just the thought of that for me just makes me want to get sick. And then we talked that day, and I just said, you're coming home. And then she was home. We went back a month later. Her and her mom went back later and moved all her shit out later. But we had to get her home right now. And she's been home ever since. And, and the thing as parents is we don't have control over what our kids are going to do. And even to this day, I have my daughters and they all do whatever they do. And I still have no control over what they do. Right? I just hope that my life helps them to not do something that would take their life. But then again, life happens, and so so I couldn't imagine what that would be like, and I'm really sorry. And that's what I know of. That's what reminds me of you all the time, is that you lost a child to this illness, and it was once. All it takes is once, which is a huge reason why I wanted you on the podcast. I know you've been trying to be an advocate for parents and for schools, and trying to carry awareness and do interviews with TV and things like this. And, and what's the main premise of the message that you're trying to carry through living post Lily to other parents or the world as a whole? What is that message?
I wish it on nobody and at all. I'm just glad you're still here, Lucy. Losing a child, there's nothing like it. I've experienced just about everything that there is to experience traumatically in life. But losing a child, nothing will ever top it. Nothing is ever like this. To any of the parents or siblings who have lost family due to this disease, or even at all, there is help out there. There is change available if you're willing to seek that growth and let go of your guilt and shame. And to help one another and love each other through with whatever it is that you're going through is extremely important. Normalizing recovery and is huge. And because it does change lives. Advocating for recovery, that there are places where you can seek help with minors or anybody. If someone didn't show me or say it to me, I would have never have changed my life because I didn't know there was anything else. But there is a different life out there. If you're willing to grow humble enough, give yourself a minute and let the change happen through the work that you're able to accomplish with those mentors that are willing to guide you and love you through it, to have that trust and patience with yourself. Your life will change. If I didn't have this recovery in me, I'm not saying that I'm perfect by all means. My kids wouldn't have a parent today. Not speaking at schools, or have parents out there that don't want their kids subjected to this. Well, I got news for you. Your kids are already subjected to it. You can't control any child that goes to school with your kid, what they have in their pockets, their lifestyle, or even your children. Because if I could, my daughter would be still alive if I could control her. I could give her all the knowledge and power and tools that she needed. But ultimately, it was her choice. And her legacy will go on. Her legacy will go on into the House of Commons to be recognized that, yeah, this does affect kids. You know, after my daughter went into the hospital, within 10 days, 11 kids came in overdosed on fentanyl and returned home. So there's no help for kids like that. They're kept in this bubble. And the reality is it can happen anywhere in any lifestyle. You know, addiction does not discriminate. Drugs and alcohol do not discriminate on your pocketbook, what neighborhood you live in. And it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care who you are. It'll snatch you up and take you. And if that knowledge isn't poured out to those kids and their parents, because the arrogance is just uncanny in that lifestyle. Oh, it would never happen to me. I sure hope it doesn't happen to you. You know, because so many people are loved. So many people don't feel that love and are stuck there in addiction because they don't know, because they're not educated, or they don't think they're valued enough to seek recovery or have help.
And honestly, Mary, I think our society produces a lot of the spiritual sickness. You know, young girls and young boys, they're subject to whatever ideologies and social media and what they're supposed to be and how they're supposed to be, and the need for validation and the need to be pretty and the need to be strong and the need to be all these things that aren't even real. And we grow into teenagers and young adults and we seek all of these things. We get into relationships at 20 years old and vow for marriage based in faulty fear-based belief systems, and then we wonder why midlife crisis happens. And you know, there's no, to me, I've seen it, man, and I believe it through the work I've done, is most midlife crisis are people base their whole lives on a false set of value systems, and there's not enough love. There's too much fear, and then they try to change everything on the outside of themselves to fix what's wrong on the inside. And I'm an advocate of recovery too. I tag myself as a First Nations recovery activist, period, because I want people to know that recovery isn't about drugs and alcohol. It's about a lifestyle that we can build and look within ourselves and teach other people, educate other people on. This is a way of living that we have to go within ourselves to look at ourselves and to become our best selves and then give that away. And it's really recovery from a spiritual malady, the process of recovering from an illness or an injury. The illness or injury is, I have broken parts within me. I have faulty belief systems. Let's look at it. Let's face it. And let's do our best to try to heal. So I think I'm going to wrap it up. Is there any last words that you'd like to give to maybe, you know, a kid or a mom, a parent, just somebody out there, your choice, a kid, a mom, dad, family? Who would you like to say the last words to give them a little bit of hope, or give them the, you know, perseverance message or whatever it is? And if you can, just look into this camera here and just pretend you're talking to somebody who might be really needing to hear what you have to say.
It can really be anybody, because like I said, this disease does not discriminate. Your feelings, your anguish is your own. Your hopes and your dreams are your own as well. People don't come back from what's happened to me. I believe that you can come and you can heal and you can grow and you can help others to do the same. All it took was one person who said that they believed in me and showed me what true love was in community. Let go of your shame and your guilt. Because there's healing on the other side of that. And for anybody who's lost someone close to them, I never thought it would happen, but I'm only just starting to come out of that grief and let that grief grow around and heal from what I've lost. And I really, truly believe in you, and I believe in myself, and I believe in this system of healing that malady. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Bill, for having me on your show. And I really appreciate the work that you do.
Thank you, beautiful. I thank you for coming and sharing your heart and soul. Appreciate you.
I appreciate you too.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, hi.
Hi, hi.